It's always going to be cut in our specimens. Okay? And we know that comes from the right ventricle. Right? So from the front, this is the right auricle. This is the right ventricle. This would make this the left auricle, and this the left ventricle. The apex of the heart points downward and is always on the left side. So this has to be the left side here because we see it on the bottom. Okay? So now, there's a line. I don't know if you can see that line right here. See this right here? I'm kind of scoring it. This is what's called the interventricular sulcus. And it separates the right ventricle from the left ventricle. The coronary sulcus separates the atrium from the ventricle. So now, as blood goes into the heart, remember we're always going to start on the right side. Right atrium is going to go in. It's going to go in through the vena cava, and this is where the vena cava enters right here. From the vena cava it goes into the atrium. From the atrium it goes into the ventricle. And we know that this ventricle has the valve. This is the right-sided valve, so this is the tricuspid valve. Yeah?
Go ahead.
Okay. The strings are the chorda tendineae. And the chorda tendineae go into these big muscles where I'm put right here. Those are called the papillary muscles. This is the moderator band, part of the conduction system, the electrical conduction system. If you look at the wall on the inside of the ventricle, it looks like trabeculae, just like trabecular bone had these like the honeycomb shape. Same thing here with this. This is called trabecula carne. Don't confuse that with chili con carne. In the atrium, we have something that looks similar to trabecula carne, but that's called pectinate muscle. And if we turn the atrium inside out, you kind of see that. So this pectinate muscle is very similar to this trabecula carne. Okay. So now, after blood fills the ventricle, it's going to be pushed upward. In your physiology, you learn how that happens, but this will contract. It'll push blood upward, and it will go through this valve here. See the flap? This valve is called the pulmonary semilunar valve because it's going into the pulmonary trunk. So these semilunar valves are named for where they're going, not where they're coming from. So the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk. Then we'll have the pulmonary arteries go into each lung. Pulmonary veins go back and enter the left atrium. Right, there's two pulmonary veins on each side carrying oxygenated blood into the atrium. From the atrium, we go down into the ventricle, and at that point here, we have the bicuspid valve. Other than having two cusps for bicuspid, the chorda tendineae are the same, the papillary muscles, which are here, are the same. The thing that's missing here is the moderator band. There's no moderator band on the left side, only on the right side. Okay? The other thing I want to show you at this point is look how thick this myocardium is. This myocardium is the heart muscle. This is really thick on this side versus this side, which is really thin in comparison. And the reason why is you don't need as much force to push blood from the right side to the lungs than you do to go from the left side down to your toes. It's a much further distance, so you need bigger muscle. Right? So then, from the left ventricle, we will go through the aortic valve, which is behind here, and out into the aorta. So here's a trick for you. You can put your finger in any one of these holes and it'll come out somewhere, right? So if you know that this tube is going to come out of the left atrium, or the left ventricle rather, sorry, the left ventricle, it has to be part of the aorta, or at least a branch of the aorta, right? So here's the aorta, here's the pulmonary trunk, and they're connected. If you kind of look, they have this little connection to them. It's not very strong. This connection is called the ligamentum arteriosum. And this is the actual aorta, part of the aorta. And it was cut so you don't see the rest of it, but it would come out and go down. Okay.
So what is this one?
So this one here, if you were to be asked that question, you would see this, this is the what? What is this tube here? Pulmonary trunk. Well, you know the pulmonary trunk branches off into what? The two pulmonary arteries. So from here, blood's going this way and blood's going that way. So this is the right pulmonary artery, and this would be the left pulmonary artery branching off of the trunk. Right? If you know where you are in space, and you know what's supposed to be where, you may not be able to find it, but you can figure it out by poking around. Okay? That's pretty much it. That's the major stuff.
So this is the back,
This is the front.
front.
This is the ventral side. The back isn't as pretty. See, the back is all mushy versus this front, which is nice and smooth. All of these are here. These tubes here. If you kind of look through here, where they go, these are the vena cava. The inferior vena cava comes up, the superior vena cava comes down, and it enters the right atrium. Okay. You can kind of see where the atrium is attached over here, and you can kind of see on this flap, the auricle is the outside of outside of the atrium. If you were to look on the inside, you could see that. You can see like a pouch in there, but the rest of the atrium is over here. Right? And you can kind of, if you kind of use your imagination and you kind of follow these holes, you would see where they're going. Okay?
Can you please go over this big one here?
That's the left ventricle,
Ventricle. This one.
the right ventricle.
The right ventricle. So this line.
Interventricular sulcus. It separates the two ventricles.
This is the left atrium.
Yep.
And the right atrium.
Yep.
Right atrium.
That's called the auricle, which is the outside of the atrium. Now on this side, they left, so they're going to miss this part. There are two chambers here, one here and one here. Which one do you think is which?
This one is left.
Left ventricle, right ventricle. Right. So if this is the left ventricle, what must this valve be? The bicuspid valve. That's right. Which means, what's this? What's above the mitral valve?
The aorta.
The left atrium. Right? So therefore, now, hold on. If this is the ventricle, blood is going to go through this way, going through this valve here. What do you call that? No. Well, it is the aortic semilunar valve. That's right. And once it passes through the aortic semilunar valve, it's in the aorta now. Right? What's the first branch off the aorta? Brachiocephalic trunk. This is the aortic arch right here. See, so even though you didn't see this view from here in this one, you can still figure out what these things are by where they are located. Right? What's this?
The left atrium.
Left atrium. What's this?
The pulmonary trunk.
Pulmonary trunk. That's right. And then what is this thing that I told you connects the aorta and the pulmonary trunk?
Tricuspid.
No, it's on the outside.
The pulmonary.
The ligamentum arteriosum. All right. So there you go. So what would we call this? This is between this ventricle and this ventricle. So this is wall. Interventricular myocardium. It's also what do we call a wall between two spaces? It's a special medical term.
Cavity?
Well, the cavity is the space. But what do we call the wall between the two cavities? You have one in your nose separating your two nostrils. A what?
Fissura.
A septum, that's right. So this would be called the interventricular septum, which is on the inside part of that sulcus, which is on the outside. Right? Here's that sulcus. Here's this. Well, you really can't. The septum is right behind this muscle. It would be here, but here you can see it nice and clearly. Interventricular septum. All right. If you know the stuff I just showed you, you'll get all the hard questions right.
And you have 50 hard questions and like 2. Okay. 40 hard questions, like 2.